Nia carefully adjusted the velvet-lined display, angling the rings just right so the diamonds caught the light. Her fingers moved fast, practiced. She'd done this hundreds of times, but her expression stayed blank, almost mechanical. The mall buzzed softly in the background, a familiar symphony of voices and footsteps. She didn't look up when the group of men walked by. Didn't need to. Their laughter carried, sharp and dismissive, the kind of laugh that had no real joke. Behind it, just power. "Nia?" a voice called mockingly. Too familiar. She glanced up and saw Trent, tall in his slim gray suit, the same lazy smirk spread across his face from the last time they'd spoken, months ago after she'd learned what their dates really meant to him. He leaned slightly on the glass case like he owned it, like he owned her. "Girls like you don't get rings," he said, gesturing to the cases with his chin. "You sell them." His friends chuckled as if that line was original. Nia didn't flinch. She reached for the keys under the register and calmly locked the case, her hands trembling just slightly. Trent noticed but didn't press. "Still behind the counter, huh?" he added before walking off, leaving the scent of cologne and cheap superiority in his wake. Nia let out a breath once he was gone. Not because of the insult, she'd heard worse, but because of how easily he could still find the bruise beneath, her skin. She turned her back, took the cleaning cloth, and began polishing the glass surface slowly, as if wiping away his fingerprints might also clean out his voice from her ears. "Hey, Nia," her manager Carla called from the stockroom, a bit out of breath, clipboard in hand. "We've got a VIP consult Friday afternoon. The boss wants you to handle it." Nia raised an eyebrow. "Me?" Carla nodded. "Client asked for someone with design knowledge. You've got the best hand sketches in the place. It's custom. Work. Big spend. Don't mess it up." "Thanks for the confidence," Nia muttered under her breath, but she didn't argue. She wiped her hands and returned to organizing a new shipment of earring stands. The rest of the day passed in retail rhythm. Smiles that didn't touch her eyes, questions about birthstones, exchanges for wrong ring sizes. She answered them all politely, efficiently, like someone who didn't have time to be offended anymore. On her break, Nia sat in the back room with a granola bar and her sketch pad. She drew quickly, lines forming a floral ring setting, something bold but feminine. Not for a client, just for herself, something she'd never wear, but liked to imagine. A knock on the door snapped her out of it. Carla peeked in. "Don't forget. Friday, 3 p.m. Blackstone." "Blackstone?" Nia repeated. Carla smirked. "As in the Blackstone. Julian? Quiet guy? Crazy money? Be ready." Nia nodded, more out of instinct than excitement. Clients were clients. Some were rich, some were rude, some were both. They came in with too much perfume and not enough manners. All she had to do was be professional. That part was easy. It was being invisible afterward that took work. Friday arrived, and with it, nerves. Nia wore a tailored black blouse and light makeup. Not glamorous, just clean and neat. Her sketch pad was tucked beneath the register, just in case. She busied herself with inventory until the door chimed. He wasn't what she expected. Julian Blackstone stepped in like he didn't belong to the tabloids. No sunglasses, no assistant, no arrogance. He wore a navy shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie. His hair was dark and perfectly unstyled, and he looked like someone who had never needed to raise his voice to be heard. "I'm here for the custom appointment," he said, tone measured. Carla motioned toward Nia. "She'll take care of you." He turned toward her, eyes scanning her face once, then the space around them. "Nia?" he asked, confirming. She nodded. He offered a hand. Clean grip, cool palm. No ring. They sat together at the back consultation table. She pulled out a few trays of diamonds, a couple of sketches, and a soft tone. "So, are we designing for someone specific?" she asked. "Not yet," Julian replied, glancing at the trays. "I want to auction a piece at our foundation's next gala. Something timeless. Not flashy, classic elegance." Nia nodded, selecting a marquise cut and placing it beside a platinum band. "Do you prefer white gold or platinum?" "Whichever keeps the focus on the design," he said. Then added, "You have a calm way with this." She glanced up, surprised. Most clients talked over her, not to her. "I've been doing it a while." He leaned back slightly, studying the rough pencil sketches she laid out. "Did you draw these?" She nodded again. "They're better than what my usual designer sends." A pause. Compliments weren't foreign to Nia, but they usually came with a smirk or expectation. This didn't. "Thanks," she said simply. While they talked, the door swung open again. Trent walked in, sunglasses perched on his head, grinning like a man on vacation. He stopped short when he saw Julian and Nia, seated together at the table. His eyes darted to the open velvet trays, the designs between them. "Well, well," he muttered. "Moving up, huh, Nia?" Julian looked up, expression unreadable. Nia, jaw tight, didn't respond. Trent chuckled to himself, made a show of browsing for 10 seconds, and walked out without buying a thing. Julian watched the interaction without commenting. When Nia returned her focus to the sketches, he asked, "Friend?" She paused. "Old mistake." Julian nodded like he understood more than she said. Then he pointed to a sketch of a leaf twist band. "That one. That's the design." Nia blinked. "Really?" "Yes. It looks like something that remembers where it came from." It was a strange compliment. But Nia found herself smiling, not because of his words, but because, for once, someone had picked a design that felt like hers. As Julian finalized the order, Nia wrote it down in her neat, steady handwriting. She slipped the sketch into a folder, tucked her pad back under the register, and returned to her normal tasks as he left. She didn't realize until later, when she was sweeping near the front, that he'd left a small note on the sketch itself. Just one line, in clean handwriting. "Don't let men who don't understand value set your price." Nia stood there a long moment, the broom still in her hand, reading it over and over again, unsure why something that simple felt like the first kind thing anyone had said in weeks. Julian returned on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, stepping through the glass doors with the same understated presence he'd carried the first time. No entourage, no flash. Just a nod to the front clerk and a polite, "Is Nia available?" Carla spotted him instantly and gestured toward the back consultation area where Nia was organizing loose sapphires by shade. She looked up, surprised but composed, and met his gaze without missing a beat. "Back for more design work?" she asked, gently sliding the trays aside. Julian smiled slightly. "I like the way you worked. I thought maybe we could try another design. Something for a private collection this time. No deadlines. I just want it to be perfect." "Of course," Nia said, motioning toward the table. She pulled out her sketch pad again and began laying out gemstone options. "Any idea on stone preference? Diamond again? Or something more unique?" He leaned forward, scanning the array without rushing. "I'm not tied to tradition. What would you recommend if the goal was something quiet but unmistakable?" Nia didn't hesitate. She reached for a deep green emerald, oval cut, and held it up to the light. "Emeralds have flaws, inclusions, technically, but that's what makes each one different. There's a saying, if it's too clear, it's probably not real." Julian's eyes flicked to hers. "You like emeralds." "I like honesty in a stone," she replied, placing it beside a tapered gold setting. "Perfection doesn't always tell a story." He nodded, clearly considering her words as more than a sales pitch. "Can you sketch it out?" She took a pencil and moved with instinct, sweeping arcs, firm angles. Her lines were precise, yet fluid. The band curved in a modest twist, framing the emerald like it had grown into the gold. Julian watched in silence, his hand resting loosely against his chin. He didn't interrupt, didn't redirect. When she finished, he picked up the paper and turned it slowly. "It's elegant," he said finally. "Like it doesn't need to explain itself." Nia gave a modest smile. That was the goal. They went back and forth for the next 20 minutes, discussing band thickness, setting depth, and the type of gold that would best complement the emerald's hue. Her voice never wavered, confident without trying to impress. Julian asked questions that weren't standard, about the ethics of sourcing, the wear of metals over time, the meaning behind certain shapes. She answered each one thoughtfully. At one point she asked, "Is this piece for someone important?" Julian paused. "Yes, but not in the way people usually mean that." That was all he said, and Nia didn't push. She just noted the specs and began drawing a second version with minor adjustments. The moment was quiet, but it held weight. Two people speaking more in what they weren't saying than what they were. Then the door chimed again. Nia didn't have to look. She felt it. The shift in air, the swagger in the footsteps. Trent. She didn't pause her sketching, but her shoulders tensed slightly. Julian, sensing it, glanced up just as Trent strolled past the counter and toward the custom tables. "Well, look at this," Trent said, his voice smooth and sharp. "Didn't think I'd see you in the VIP section, Nia." She kept her eyes on the paper. "I work here, Trent," he chuckled, glancing at Julian, then back at her. "So you're helping now, huh? Bet that's a step up from polishing display glass." Julian stood slowly, not aggressive, but calm, measured. "Is there something you need?" Trent smirked. "Nah, just browsing. Nice stone you got there." Surprised they let her touch it. Nia's pencil paused for half a second, then resumed. She didn't meet Trent's eyes. Didn't need to. The silence between her and Julian was louder than anything Trent could say. Trent shrugged and walked off, his laughter trailing behind him like a bad aftershave. Julian sat back down, eyes following. The exit. Then, without turning, he said evenly, "He doesn't know value when he sees it." Nia looked up. The words weren't flirtation. There was no charm in the tone, just observation. Direct. Clear. She stared at him for a moment, then lowered her gaze. "Thanks," she said quietly. "I wasn't trying to compliment," he replied. "I know," she said. "That's why it matters." They worked in silence for a bit longer. Nia adjusted the design, refining the grooves, suggesting a hidden engraving on the inner band. Julian agreed without fanfare. As she reached for a final tray of accent stones, she caught his expression. Still, focused, a hint of something unspoken behind his composure. "You said it's for someone important," she murmured. "I did," he replied. "You want me to engrave something personal?" Julian looked at her, carefully. "Not yet. I'll know when I see it finished." She nodded and slipped the final sketch into a protective sleeve, labeled it with his name, and handed him a receipt for the down payment. "We'll contact you once the wax mold is ready." Julian took the paper but didn't move immediately. "If I wanted to commission another piece, would you handle it personally?" "I'd be happy to," Nia said, voice steady. "Good," he replied. Then, after a short pause, added, "You don't sell rings, you make them." And then he left. Nia stood there for a while after, pretending to tidy up, but really just processing the weight of that statement. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It just was, like her work. Like her. As she returned the trays and cleared the table, Carla walked by and raised an eyebrow. "Well, someone's got a new favorite client." Nia shrugged. "He's just respectful." "That's rare enough," Carla smirked. "Well, respectful or not, he's spending. That's what keeps the lights on." Nia didn't argue, but as she slipped the sketch into the safe and double-checked the lock, her mind lingered not on the money or the compliment, but on the stillness in Julian's gaze, the way he'd watched her draw like the paper might reveal more than just a ring. She finished her shift, took the long route home, and kept thinking about that emerald. Flawed, rich, honest, not perfect, but unmistakably real. Julian returned just before closing. He walked in with the same composed energy, a slight nod to Carla before asking, "Is Nia still here?" Carla looked up from the register, surprised. "She's in back," she replied. "Give me a sec." But before she could call out, Nia stepped from the storage room, a folder of restock slips in hand. She paused when she saw him, then walked over without hesitation. "You're back," she said, not smiling, but something in her eyes softened. "I need another piece," he said. "Simply, this one's for our foundation's gala. It'll be auctioned, so something bold. Attention-grabbing." Nia nodded, already moving toward the locked cabinet of colored stones. "Any theme for the event?" Julian followed her, watching as she unlocked the case and pulled out trays with the smooth rhythm of someone who knew their inventory by touch. "We're funding a new initiative, free design education for under-resourced schools. I want the piece to reflect potential." "Then let's not go with diamonds," she said, lifting a tray of rubies and sapphires. "Too safe. You want something that says, unconventional, but worth noticing." He looked at her. Exactly. They sat side by side at the back consultation table sorting stones. Nia lined up deep sapphire blues against warm rose gold bands. Julian asked about her thoughts on color theory, and she explained how cooler tones created contrast against darker skin, how cuts changed, how light danced depending on wrist movement. He listened, genuinely, with the kind of attention that didn't rush or interrupt. At one point, she said offhandedly, "If I had my own shop, I'd do a collection like this. One that didn't follow trends, just told stories." Julian didn't look away from the stone he held. "You want your own place?" Nia gave a short laugh. "Yeah, someday. But dreams like that cost more than I make in 5 years. Doesn't mean they aren't real," he said, setting the stone down gently. She didn't answer, just pulled her sketchpad closer and began outlining a bold design. Half-moon sapphires framing a central marquise opal, all nestled in rose gold vines. Julian watched in silence. Outside, through the store window, Trent and 2 of his friends leaned against the railing of the upper floor, clearly watching. One elbowed the other, gesturing toward Julian and Nia at the table. Their grins said, "Everything." Nia caught the reflection of Trent's face in the glass. Her hand paused. She didn't say anything, just resumed drawing. But her lines were harder now, the curve less fluid. Julian noticed. "Something wrong?" "No," she said, quickly. "Just tired, long day." He didn't press, but the tension in her jaw didn't go unnoticed. Later, when her shift ended, and she stepped into the back hallway near the parking lot, Trent was waiting. Leaning against the wall like he owned the building, thumbs in his pockets. "Look at you," he said, "sitting across from a Blackstone like you're somebody." Nia didn't stop walking. "Move, Trent." But he stepped in her path. "You think he's going to change your life? That he sees you as more than just a novelty? Come on, Nia. You're a project. Don't mistake curiosity for respect." Clenched her fists. "You really don't get tired of hearing yourself, do you?" He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. "Just trying to save you from another fall. You don't belong in that man's world. And trust me, he knows it." Her eyes flared, but she didn't answer. She brushed past him and walked away, heels clicking sharp against the concrete. The next morning, Nia arrived early, pretending it was for inventory, but really, she just needed quiet. She worked in the back until mid-morning when Julian walked in. He greeted her like always, but when she joined him at the table, he looked at her more closely. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, even. "Fine," she said, too fast. Julian didn't say anything for a moment. Then he reached for the sketch she'd done the night before. "This design, it's got edge." I was angry when I drew it, she admitted. Want to talk about it? She hesitated, then said, Some people don't believe women like me deserve anything elegant. Julian set the sketch down. They're wrong. There was no pause, no hesitation. Just those two words, steady and final. Naya looked at him. It's not just about class or money. It's about how the world sees women like me, working behind counters, walking home alone, always proving we're more than what people assume. You don't have to prove it, he said quietly. Not to me. She blinked, caught off guard by the gentleness. He continued, I want you to come to the gala. She raised an eyebrow. As what? My guest. Not as your designer? I'm already your client, he said, smiling faintly. Now I want you there as the person who made this piece matter. She hesitated. That's not exactly my world. Maybe it should be. Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Another part heard Trent's voice again, warning her, laughing at the idea. She looked down at the design again. The strong curves, the unexpected balance. It didn't ask permission to be beautiful. It just was. Julian waited, patient. She didn't say yes. Not yet. But she didn't say no either. I don't have anything to wear to something like that, she said, trying to find a way out that didn't sound like fear. I'll take care of it, he replied, already reaching for his phone. She waved it off. No. If I go, it's going to be on my terms, my dress, my way. Julian smiled. Good. She stared at him, unsure what to do with the quiet ease between them. This wasn't some fantasy. He wasn't feeding her lines or treating her like a pet project. He just saw her. Not what she sold. Not what she wore. Just her. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Nia stood in front of her mirror, the hem of her dress barely grazing her knees. It wasn't designer, not even close. Just a muted plum slip she'd tailored herself and paired with a pair of simple black heels. No shimmer, no daring cuts, nothing that screamed attention. Just quiet elegance. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the tiny clasp behind her neck. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was dressing to hide. She was dressing to show up. The gala was being held at one of the downtown hotels, the kind of place with marble floors so polished they reflected your insecurities back at you. Nia stepped out of the cab slowly, adjusting her clutch, eyes sweeping. Over the long line of black-tie guests and glittering gowns, cameras flashed sporadically, laughter echoed off the walls, and the staff inside welcomed each name with perfectly scripted smiles. She stepped inside alone. Julian was already there, speaking with one of the foundation directors near the stage. He saw her almost immediately, offered a smile, and stepped aside so she could walk toward him without anyone announcing her arrival. When she reached him, he didn't scan her outfit or offer a compliment meant to make up for the simplicity of her dress. He just looked at her the same way he always had, direct, calm, and steady. You made it, he said. Would have been rude to leave you standing here without your guest, she replied, voice tight with nerves. You look exactly like yourself, he said, and she didn't know whether to take it as comfort or challenge. As the evening unfolded, Nia stayed close to Julian's side, but never clung. He moved with quiet authority, introducing her not as a date, not as a +1, but as the designer of the custom piece being donated to the auction. She created the piece from scratch, he said to a group of investors. No templates. Every line was hers. Eyes shifted. People blinked. Some nodded. Others scanned her up and down like they couldn't reconcile the woman in the off-rack dress with the brilliance of the design on display. Then came the murmurs. She's the jeweler? One woman whispered behind a champagne flute. A store. Girl? Another asked, just loud enough. Nia stood still, spine straight, her face a mask of calm, but her stomach churned. She didn't belong here, not in their eyes. not even with Julian's praise. She was being tolerated, measured, weighed. And then she saw him, Trent, standing near the bar, dressed in a tux that looked rented but worn like royalty. He hadn't seen her yet, or maybe he had and was just waiting. She tried to look away, but he walked right toward her, a half-drunk glass of whiskey in hand, and that same slow, smug grin plastered on his face. "Well, well," he drawled, eyeing her. "Didn't think I'd see you here, but I should have known. You always find a way to climb." Julian glanced at Trent, then back at Naya, but said nothing. She met Trent's gaze evenly. "Nice dress," he added, tilting his glass. "Did you make it from the curtains in the stockroom?" Something inside her cracked. She took a step forward, voice low but sharp. "You know what's funny, Trent? You walk into rooms like you built them, when all you ever did was inherit the keycard. You look at me like I'm the joke, but you can't take it. This idea that someone like me might have been seen, chosen, valued. Without thinking, it makes you smaller." A few heads turned. Julian remained silent, still by her side. Trent blinked, surprised. He opened his mouth to say something else, but she cut him off. "Keep laughing," she said. "But while you're busy mocking, I'm busy making. And that ring you're staring at? It's mine." Trent stepped back, trying to laugh it off, but his face was red, jaw tight. He muttered something under his breath and turned toward the bar. Julian leaned closer. "You didn't need me to say anything." "No," she replied. "I didn't." Later in the evening, after the auction, after the polite applause and the formal photos, they stood near the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The cool night air drifted in through the open doors, and for the first time since she arrived, Nia felt like she could breathe. But that breath didn't last long. She turned to Julian, watching him as he adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. "Why bring me here?" she asked, not accusingly, but with quiet weight. He looked at her for a long second. "Because it's time they saw what I see." "And what is that?" she asked. Julian didn't flinch. "Talent, poise, power. You don't walk into rooms like them because you've never needed to, but maybe they need to know what it looks like when someone earns their place instead of inherits it." His words hung in the air, sincere. Meant to empower. But they didn't land the way he hoped. Naya turned slightly, her voice softer now. "You brought me here to prove a point." "No," he said. "I brought you because this world has always tried to define who deserves to be seen. I thought maybe tonight we could rewrite that a little. But it still felt like I had to perform," she whispered. "Like I had to prove I was worth the invite." Julian didn't have an answer, and she didn't press for one. She left before the event ended, declined the offer of a car, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and walked through the cool streets, heels echoing softly against the pavement. Her mind spun not with embarrassment, but with something more complicated. Doubt. Not in herself, but in the space she'd been invited into. Was she a guest or a statement? A woman or a symbol? At a red light she paused and caught her reflection in a storefront window. Same Nia, same eyes, same dress, but now carrying something heavier than the fabric on her shoulders. The realization that even when people mean well, they can still place you in a frame that doesn't feel like your own. She kept walking, the noise of the city falling behind. Her, the weight of elegance clinging like perfume. The morning after the gala, Nia walked into work hoping to disappear behind her usual duties. But the buzz started before she even clocked in. Carla met her at the back door, phone in hand, face tight. "Don't go to the floor," she said flatly. "Come see this." Nia followed her to the office where a laptop sat open with a dozen browser tabs. One photo filled the screen. Julian and Nia, arm in arm at the gala. The headline read, "From sales counter to center stage. The ring girl who stole a billionaire's spotlight." Beneath it, comments exploded with speculation. some calling her a gold digger, others reducing her to a curiosity, a Cinderella, plucked from the dust for one fancy night. "I didn't ask for this," Naya said, her voice barely audible. Carla sighed. "I know, but the phone's been ringing all morning. People asking if you're still working here. Some just breathing and hanging up." Nia's chest tightened. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I believe you," Carla said. "But corporate doesn't like attention that doesn't come with receipts. They're asking me to take you off the floor for now. Let things cool down." Nia stared at her. "So I'm just supposed to hide?" "It's not punishment. It's protection." But it didn't feel like protection. It felt like silence. Like shame. That afternoon Julian called. She didn't answer. He texted instead. "I saw the headlines. I'm sorry, I can make this go away. My lawyer's on standby." She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "No lawyers. No damage control. This is my mess to clean up." Julian tried again the next day, showing up at her kiosk with coffee and calm concern. But Nia met him in the service hallway before he could make it to the counter. "I appreciate you," she said, "but I can't be the story you rescue." "You're not," he said. "You're the story that should be told." "That's not how the world's reading it," she replied. "Right now, I'm the girl who posed next to a billionaire and forgot her place." Julian said nothing for a moment. "So what happens now?" "I quit." His eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not the solution." "It's mine," she said. He didn't argue further, just looked at her with something between pride and worry. Then he nodded once and left. The next week was brutal. Nia boxed up her locker, cleared her designs from the desk drawers, and walked out without ceremony. The silence afterward hit harder than she expected. She had no schedule to cling to, no customers to distract her, and no paycheck to ground her. For the first few days, she barely left her apartment. But then, one morning, she pulled out her sketchpad and started drawing. Not because anyone asked, not for approval, just because her fingers needed to move. Her kitchen table became her new workstation. She ordered a small set of tools online with her last paycheck and sourced recycled gold pieces from thrift shops. She melted them down herself with borrowed equipment at a local maker space. Slowly, piece by piece, she began to craft her own collection, small, imperfect, but entirely hers. Every design had a name. Every curve carried intention. She didn't post them online. She wasn't ready for that yet. But she kept making. One afternoon, while polishing a delicate moonstone ring with a torch she wasn't fully comfortable using, her phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Spotlight Feature Opportunity. Modern Artisan Series." She almost deleted it, assuming spam, but something about the sender caught her eye. Faye Holloway, Features Editor, L. Artisan. Curious, she opened it. "Dear Nia, Julian's. Blackstone recently submitted one of your pieces for our Modern Artisan Spotlight series. We were struck by the originality of the design and the personal craftsmanship behind it. We'd like to feature it as the centerpiece of our next issue's charity spotlight in partnership with the Blackstone Foundation. We'd love a short interview and photos of your work, if you're open to it. Warmly, Faye Holloway." Nia froze. She reread the email 3 times before she could even react. Her first instinct was to shut the laptop. Her second was to cry. But somewhere between both reactions she laughed, sharp, disbelieving. Julian hadn't asked, hadn't warned her. He just submitted the piece. She pulled out the ring in question, a twisted asymmetrical design featuring a smoky opal hugged by braided gold. It wasn't perfect. The prongs were slightly uneven, but it was hers. Entirely hers. She didn't reply to the email right away. Instead, she called Julian. For the first time in weeks, he answered immediately. "Nia, you submitted my piece," she said. Not accusatory, but with quiet awe. I didn't think you'd let me if I asked. She paused. I might not have, but I meant it when I said your work deserved to be seen. I didn't want it. Seen like that? She said. I know. That's why I didn't submit a photo of us. Just the ring. Just your name. That's all they need. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. You still trying to rescue me? No, he said, softly. I'm trying to stand out of your way. That night, Nia stayed up editing her sketches, cleaning her tools, retouching the rings she'd made. She replied to the email before sunrise. Short, polite, grateful. Yes, I'm open to it. Her name would appear in print the next month, next to a ring born out of struggle, defiance, and precision. No mention of the gala, no photo of Julian. Just her craft, her story, her hands. And for the first time in weeks, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a ring girl in borrowed elegance. She saw a maker, an artist, a woman who didn't wait for anyone to place her in the spotlight, but still found herself standing there anyway. The hum of low conversation filled the air, softened by the glass walls and warm lighting of the luxury expo. Nia stood near her booth, dressed in a tailored black jumpsuit she'd saved for months to buy. Her pieces were displayed on dark velvet trays, the lighting above each one casting soft glows that made the stones flicker like quiet fire. She'd worked weeks for this. Every clasp, every bend, every polish, her hands, her vision. Now it sat under exhibition lights for buyers and designers to critique, admire, or pass over. People paused as they walked by. Some asked questions. Others just took cards. A few asked to try things on. For the most part, the reactions were good, polite, interested. But Nia had learned long ago not to mistake polite curiosity for respect. She kept her answers professional, her posture straight, her heart guarded. Mid-morning, just as the crowd thickened, one of the event assistants approached her holding a bouquet. Deep red orchids, calla lilies, and something that looked rare enough to be custom. No note, just an elegant wrap and a soft ribbon around the stems. These are for you, the assistant said, then disappeared into the crowd. Nia blinked, confused. She wasn't expecting flowers, hadn't told anyone where her booth was, not really. She looked around, half expecting to see Julian standing nearby, but there was no sign of him. She placed the bouquet carefully on the corner of the table, trying to focus on the customer now asking about a sapphire cuff bracelet. It wasn't until later, near the midpoint of the day, that he appeared. No grand entrance, no spotlight. Just a quiet presence at the edge of her display, hands folded, watching. She looked up, surprised but not startled. You sent the flowers, Julian nodded. And bought the whole table. She blinked, then frowned. What? I bought the entire first collection, he said calmly. Everything you have displayed today. Her voice caught for a second. Why? Because I believe in what you're doing. I believe in you. She stared at him, breath stuck halfway in her chest. You didn't have to do that. I know. I wanted to, he replied. Then, without stepping closer, he added, not to own it, not to put it in a vault or display it at some dinner, but to invest in the woman who designed it. Nia folded her arms, unsure whether to be flattered or offended. So this is charity? No, he said, a little firmer. This is partnership. If you'll have it, she held his gaze. You keep showing up when I least expect it. I'll stop if that's what you want. I haven't decided yet. Julian nodded once, accepting that without resistance. Then I'll be over there, he said, pointing to a small bench near the side wall. When you do. He walked away, leaving her standing there, surrounded by a full booth and a heart half full of questions. It wasn't long after that when the tone of the room shifted. A familiar voice, smug, overconfident, sliced through the noise. Well, well, guess some girls really do know how to market a fantasy. Nia didn't need to turn. She already knew. Trent. dressed sharp, walking with two others from his firm, holding a glass of complimentary champagne like he belonged at the center of every room. He stopped in front of her table, eyes scanning the now empty trays. "Sold out already?" he asked, grinning. "Let me guess. Julian wrote a check. How convenient." Nia didn't react. She simply looked at him, calm. Actually, it was a wire transfer. The people around them chuckled softly. Not loudly, not mockingly, but they heard. Trent pressed on. "You really think this is going to last? These people, they buy stories for the season. They don't build legacies with girls who make jewelry in their kitchens." Nia placed her hand on the bouquet, then looked him dead in the eyes. "You're right. They don't build legacies with people who only see value in power and not in craft. But the ones who understand both? They're the ones who rewrite what matters." Trent opened his mouth to respond, but a voice from behind interrupted. A woman in a fitted pantsuit, holding a tablet and name badge. "Excuse me," she said to Nia. "Do you have time for an interview? We're spotlighting breakout designers and just got word about your collection's sale." Nia turned to her, offering a warm smile. "Of course." As the woman led her away, Nia didn't look back at Trent. She didn't need to. His silence was enough. The interview was short, professional. She spoke about her process, her background, the story behind the designs. She didn't name-drop Julian, didn't mention the gala, just her materials, her style, her vision. When she returned to the booth, Julian stood again. "You handled that well." "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I know, but I'm glad you were here." Julian didn't smile, just watched, her with quiet pride. "So?" She tilted her head. "So what?" "Partnership," he said. "Still on the table." Nia thought for a moment. The noise of the expo faded. The scent of fresh flowers beside her grounded her. She met his gaze. "I'm still not sure what this is." "Neither am I," he said. "But I'd rather figure it out with you than keep guessing alone." She didn't give a dramatic answer. No grand moment, just a soft nod. Measured. Real. Julian stepped back, hands still respectfully at his sides. "Then let's talk. When you're ready." She watched him go again, but this time it didn't feel like distance. It felt like space. Room to grow. And for the first time, Nia wasn't doubting whether she belonged. She was deciding where she wanted to stand. The boutique sat quietly on the corner of a renovated block, the kind of storefront that made people slow down when they passed, even if they hadn't meant to. The windows were framed in brushed bronze, the logo etched simply across the glass, NIA. No tagline, no flourish. Just the name, solid and proud, like it had always belonged there. Inside, soft lighting bathed the velvet-lined displays, each one holding a collection Nia had handcrafted herself. Pieces that bore her signature, not just in metal and stone, but in the balance between strength and softness that defined her journey. It had taken months. The paperwork, the city permits, the back and forth with suppliers. Julian had provided the investment, yes, but Nia had written the business plan, negotiated every contract, and made it clear from the beginning. This was her shop, her vision, and it would run on her terms. Julian never challenged that. He simply asked, "What do you need?" and stepped aside when it was time for her to lead. On opening day, the street was decorated with a single white ribbon across the door. No media, no interviews. Just a small card pinned near the door handle that read, "Private opening, by invitation only." Nia stood inside, adjusting the final placement of a gold filigree necklace when she heard the bell chime. She turned, expecting Carla or maybe a supplier double-checking delivery details. But it was Julian. He wasn't in a suit. Just a soft gray sweater, dark jeans, and a quiet smile that barely touched the edges of his mouth. He walked toward her, hands behind his back. "I thought you weren't coming until the afternoon," she said, smoothing the hem of her top. "I changed my mind." She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" He stepped closer, pulled one hand from behind his back, and in it a small ring box. Not a dramatic reveal. Not a performance. Just a man who looked certain, calm, and completely sure of the person standing in front of him. Naya blinked, unsure what to do. Julian slowly lowered himself to one knee, not in the center of the store, not under a spotlight, just between her and the register, where she had stood 100 times before in her past life, waiting for customers who never looked up. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not oversized, not theatrical. A simple marquise-cut emerald, framed in a setting almost identical to one she'd sketched long ago during a late-night shift, back when she thought she'd never wear something like it. Julian looked up at her, voice low. "No speeches, just this. You've built something incredible. You carry it with grace. And if there's still space in your life, I'd like to build with you too." Her hand covered her mouth, but the tears pushed through anyway. She shook her head once, then laughed breathlessly, as if trying to get the words to surface. "You know," she finally said, her voice breaking, just enough to betray the strength underneath. "Someone once told me girls like me don't get rings." Julian didn't flinch. "Then let's prove them all wrong." She looked down at him, then at the ring, then back at him. There was no stage, no camera, no applause. Just this man. And the memory of the woman she used to be standing behind. A kiosk, holding herself together through 1,000 little humiliations. She nodded, slowly at first, then with certainty. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger with care, standing only after she took his hand and pulled him into a tight embrace. Neither of them spoke, but they didn't need to. The walls around them were lined with everything she had once been told was impossible. And now it was hers. The front door opened again. Carla walked in first, carrying a small box of macarons and a wide grin. Behind her, two of Naya's former kiosk co-workers burst through, clapping, cheering, laughing louder than the quiet store usually allowed. "You didn't think we'd miss this, right?" Carla called out. Nia wiped her eyes quickly, laughing as she moved toward them, hugging one, then the other. "You guys made it." "We were here before the ribbon even came down," one of the girls said. "We've been watching the countdown online all week." As the group surrounded her, Julian stepped back, letting them crowd around her like the foundation that had carried her this far. And for once, she didn't try to deflect the praise. She stood in the center, holding her head high, ring shining. On her hand, boutique glowing behind her. Outside, just across the street, a familiar figure stood frozen. Trent. He wasn't smiling, wasn't mocking, just watching, as if trying to make sense of the woman standing at the center of it all. The girl he used to taunt, now surrounded by love, by success, by everything he said she'd never have. He didn't wave. Neither did she. She saw him. That was enough. Julian walked over, sliding an arm around her waist. She leaned into him slightly, not needing to say a thing. The boutique sign reflected in the glass window. NIA. Solid, permanent, hers. And the ring on her hand, simple and brilliant, told the rest of the story. Some rings don't just mark love. They rewrite everything they once denied. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more human, emotional stories that prove everyone deserves a second chance and a ring.